All right, we are live. Thanks everybody for joining another episode of the OpenJS Foundation's Cross-Project Council meeting. Did that not work? Okay. Today is Blur's Day, like every day. It is the, wow, why am I not able to copy and paste here? Weird. Anyway, yeah, the 22nd of September. Thanks for joining. Please add your name to the Google Doc if you haven't already. I'll drop it in the chat here for all the friends present. And of course, please help take notes. Much appreciated. Let's jump into announcements. Anonymous Jackalope.
Hi, it's me, your friend, Anonymous Jackalope. A couple of announcements for today. First off, related to other foundation meetings, we do have a standards meeting later this afternoon at 2 p.m. Eastern. Hope you can join us. Check out the GitHub issue for those meeting details. The other things we want to have, placed in your brain are thinking about the upcoming 2021 event, which I know is like crazy to think about that it's already time to maybe start getting the program committee band back together. But if you're interested in being part of the programming committee for the 2021 event, let us know so that we can make sure that you're on the email list for that. Other events coming up include the AMP Fest. AMP is having an AMP Fest, because I would too if I were AMP. AMP Fest sounds like a lot of fun. It's October 13th, and you are everyone's welcome to join. Following AMP Fest, we're doing the next AMA with the AMP TSC on the 14th. So if you have questions for the AMP TSC, please submit those as well. And then just a standing reminder, if you are interested in getting more news from the OpenJS Foundation community, the projects at list.openjsf.org email list is free and available for you to subscribe to, and we've got great updates and content coming from our CPC directors and from yours truly on a really regular basis. So please do sign up for that if you haven't done that already. So that's what I got.
And standards meeting later today.
Yep, 2 p.m. Eastern.
Fantastic. Great. Anything else from anyone? If not, we will try to quickly breeze through the agenda and then spend a little bit of time talking about the review process for projects that we've been working on and plan to do a bit of a working session today on. So first up is pull request 643. This is add examples of successful applications. Toby opened this as a draft PR and added AMP, and as he says in here, it's we'll leave it as draft until we get some other folks in there, perhaps. And I see Sendel recently has a comment as well. Anything you want to add here, Toby?
Yeah, I mean, for me, just the idea is I would have loved to have had some information of that nature when I joined to see what others, like how others were doing this. And I also think it's valuable to have this sort of level of transparency. So if others that have similarly filed applications in the past feel the same way, it would be great to do that. Now, as I said, I don't want like the only example there to be AMP. I think AMP is like a special enough project and not really representative of what most other projects are in the foundation, that it would be awkward to give just that as an example. So if others feel likely, likewise, then they should submit that whatever they have. And if they don't, we should just close this.
Okay.
I do email copies. I think we have 3 that are public. They're just in random places. So having them all in one place and a logical way to find them makes sense. So
Great.
Oh, so if there are public ones and that you want to actually
Yeah,
commit
yeah,
those,
yeah.
that would be great.
Go back. Yeah.
Great.
Mhm.
Thanks, Robin.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Excellent. So quickly moving on, the next one is, unless someone has more, please interrupt me. Simplify proposal process. This is 635, issue 635. Next step is a PR is needed. So I don't know if we need to talk about this at all, but I'll definitely open the call again for anyone to jump in and try to simplify the proposal process with the PR. And I think even if we just got something started, we could comment in the PR and flesh it out further. So if anyone wants to take that up, that'd be great. Moving on to issue 632, provide implementation guidance for DCO CLA. Any comments here?
It's still blocked on me, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay, no worries. I will skip over the review process one and jump to the governance changes for collaboration network. Do you have an update there, Michael?
I'd sent an email just asking that the board vote be restarted. So hopefully we can get that to take place in the next week or so, and then it can land.
Great, excellent. Cool, so then final one on the list here is develop annual review process for projects. This is an issue 592. And we can kind of jump into this whole working session. I know, Toby, you've got some open PRs and issues, I think, and from work that Chris has done as well. Should we dive into that?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Joe. The first thing I want to do is share here the meeting notes. So we had a couple of meetings on this topic, like sort of like a small group of folks, and we sort of ended up in a place where we had sort of concrete actions we wanted to run right away, and sort of like longer term blue ocean thinking. I think it would be useful today to start by looking at the concrete stuff first, so people have a good understanding of like what exactly at stake, and then maybe either next week, or if we still have time today, to start on to go into the more sort of like long-term thinking around this. Does that make sense?
Sounds good.
I'm seeing like heads node, and so let's do this. So indeed, I have filed a new pull request. Maybe that's what we should start looking at as a proposal for a growth plan template. So this is actually pull request 647, and let me just share the
Links in the chat.
Yeah. So that's your best view of it. So I looked at different ways of handling this, and what I ended up is actually like a table. I don't know if that's the best option, but that's what sort of felt the clearest to me. So what I essentially did is I looked at the progress document, which is at the root of our CPC repository, and turned the requirements to move into growth stage and impact stage into this table. And the reason I added the growth stage requirements in there is it feels like a number of projects that are in growth stage don't necessarily have all of those set, because some of them were added after projects were in growth stage. So for example, like there was a security requirement there's a requirement to accept security reports and publicly disclose them after the fix has been made available as part of growth. I don't think that this was there when, for example, AMP joined. And although AMP has such a policy through Google, I don't know that we actually have a policy like this for the project set. So the idea was just like, if you're in growth, make sure that you actually meet the requirements of growth, and then go for the impact stage requirements. And so
I think that's a great idea. There are some even for at large, aren't there?
Yeah, we could add those too.
So I'm just thinking like having the at large, because I think as part of like the yearly review, it would actually be great to look at this table and say, yeah, well, we added a security requirement and none of the projects have done it. So maybe we need a CPC focus to help make that happen. Or, you know, it would help us identify the gaps in what we've said are important at the different levels and then focus on it.
Let me actually look at what those requirements are. So these would be the same requirements that you'd meet from that you'd need to just from joining the foundation, right?
Yeah.
And I wonder, because I actually removed a bunch of the growth requirements that were either obvious or like self-contained. Or were contained into the impact requirements. Like, you know, if you have to have, if like growth asks for like two maintainers minimum, and like impact asks for 5, since there's a growth plan for impact, you don't need to sort of like.
Yeah,
have
okay,
those
yeah.
at both
So,
stages.
right, from the growth plan, yeah, that doesn't make sense. From the yearly review plan, the larger set would probably make sense.
So I'm looking at the acceptance criteria for at-large projects. It says 2 CPC sponsors to champion the project and provide mentorship as needed. A presentation to at the meeting of the CPC. I don't know what that means.
I think
This is
that's
probably
basically the,
Oh.
you know, the presentation to the rest of the CPC saying we think this should be a project that's accepted.
Right, there's probably like a word missing in there. So this is what I'm looking at right now, just so people know. And it's the at-large project. So more specifically this one. Acceptance, I could have linked to the acceptance criteria right away. Sorry about this. I'm just digging into the. So adherence to the foundation IP policy upon acceptance, large projects must list those status prominently on website README. I mean, it feels like this is covered, like this is like so basic, it's covered by the application process. I agree with your point, Michael. I think like from a yearly review perspective, like we probably should go into this stuff, but it feels like this is different than growth plan for growth projects wanting to reach impact.
Right.
So
it
anyway,
is different than the growth part.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I do agree that like finding some form of like a similar sort of like visual way to represent that, where we can actually tick boxes, would be useful in both, and for that review too. So going back to the growth plan, so yeah, I really split that up into growth stage requirements that felt like they were still necessary and impact stage requirements. I actually combined 2 impact stage requirements into one and also filed a pull request on this. And that is pull request 648, which is avoid duplication of impact stage acceptance criteria. Essentially, let me link to it here too. Oh, of course. I mean, this is essentially revisiting some of the progression document while I'm doing work on the growth plan, right? Not changing anything, but like fixing a bunch of things in the process.
I mean, Toby, for context, there were 3 breakout meetings on this, and I think we looked at several different organizations and metrics, and the idea was let's make this informative but more lightweight for projects, so it wasn't going to be a ton of work, because some of these, you know, project health metrics have lists that are miles long. So
yeah, absolutely, Robin. Thanks for sort of like setting the bigger picture on this. Again, what we ended up was in those couple of meetings was It would be interesting to have like good health metrics for projects, and this is sort of like a longer term project. It would be interesting maybe to revisit how exactly we structure these different stages. But all of that is good and fine, but we also need to focus on like current, specific problems, which is what do we do with growth projects? And why don't we just have a growth plan that like is based on the existing requirements, which is essentially what I did there. Sort of like very, basically just copying what's in the progression document and turning that into something that each project can fill in, right? So for that, of course, I lost the tab where this is. So for that pull request, which is the ads growth plan template pull request, the idea would be that every project, maybe I should just share my screen here if you want. Would that be easier?
Sounds good.
So the idea here is we list the requirements for growth stage are listed here. Those for impact stage are listed here. And then for every one of those, the project would need to look at what its current status is, right? So for example, is the project successfully used in production by at least 2 independent end users? So, looking at that for AMP, for example, since that's the project I would be working on this for, well, the answer to that would be, yeah, absolutely, that's easy to do. So the current status would be, something like you just put like more than 2, so that there would be no plan. The timeline would be that's like done, and you just write a, uncomment. There are commented check marks and completed. If you look at it here, you can see those. You would just uncomment the check mark. And so that would be visually quite clear that this has been completed already. For something like that I know is something that's complex for AMP, which would be a healthy number of committers from at least 2 organizations, like an impact stage requirement. So the current status for AMP of this, being super transparent here, is most of the committers are Google employees, right? So the desired status would be a description of what concretely would that look for AMP, right? So how many, like there are probably like 40 contributors and committers that are Google employees. I don't exactly know what the numbers that aren't, but it would be the desired status would be worked with the mentor, I assumed, or the CPC directly in terms of what actual number do we need to get to there, right? And then the plan here would describe, well, how is the project planning to get there? Like, what are we going to do, and what's the timeline to do that? And so, in a sense, this growth plan is both an assessment of the current situation, right? A description of the end goals, and a description of like the actual concrete tactics that the project is going to do to get there. So it's all of those 3 things in one document. That's the idea. For me, the next steps would be to get like you all's thoughts on this. And if there's sort of, if this seems reasonable, start getting actual growth project to write their plans and see what that looks like, faced was like real life, actually having to do the work.
Definitely makes sense to me. I like the way it's kind of structured. I expect that like you're not going to fit the plan in that box, so that's probably going to have to be like a reference to something down below, a couple paragraphs or something, right?
I mean, those sort of resize when you actually write stuff, but yeah, there's a risk of the whole thing looking a bit cramped. I agree.
So I think because the rest of them will just fit nicely in the table, and it's good to have that view. If they were just links to like a paragraph below, that would probably keep it readable.
That's interesting. So you would suggest actually having the plan linked and keeping it as such. That's really cool, because then you have like the plan at the bottom.
Right. It's sort of, you got the table and then you can have like a paragraph, which is the plan for this, for this, for this. And you can easily get to it just by clicking the link. And I just think otherwise this table will get so wide or whatever that.
Yeah,
you know,
no, this is really great. I mean, this like not only solves a problem in an elegant way, in my opinion, but also has the benefit of like creating the plan at the bottom. So so then you really have like a sort of like a summary
Yep.
of like the thing at the top, and then like the concrete steps that the project are going to implement at the bottom. I'm just going to write this here. What's your handle already?
M. Dawson.
Oh yeah. To and link to it. I like that. I have to figure out how to do this. Other comments from people on this, like, concrete implementation of like the growth plan?
I guess my main question is, I still feel like we haven't addressed the question of, I think there are projects that are kind of in a permanent growth stage based on these requirements. And are we good with that, or do we want to, because like, one of the requirements is you're supposed to be working towards impact stage, but I can see projects where by these criteria, they're probably in growth forever, or growth until the end of life, but may never be impactful.
So do they need to be in growth?
That's the question. Yeah, I don't know where they belong.
Yeah, like it's growth, I think as written was like projects who have a goal to get to impact, and the foundation will provide some additional resources to get there. If that's not a goal, is there any problem with being an at-large is the.
Yeah, and then I mean we started on this discussion last time, but then there's sort of the follow-up questions where like, well, there's not necessarily like, we kind of have, most of the at-large projects are kind of like libraries that are sort of single purpose, and so I think most of our growth projects sort of thought they were maybe more than that, but then our growth and our impact projects are kind of similar. Just I don't know the answer to the question, but I can sort of see why the growth projects probably felt they were growth rather than impact. But also, and then the other question is the foundation, I mean, I know it's doing a lot for AMP, but beyond that, is the foundation actually providing resources to help these projects with their growth, or are they kind of just floating around,
But I think they should, like,
yeah.
Personally, I think
can-
it makes sense to have that. If you want to do something specific, it'd be good to have resources to support it.
Mm-hmm. I'm just asking, are we actually doing that today for any of the growth projects besides AMP?
We have a tiered plan, but we haven't been impacted yet. We have the capacity to support, almost all projects who ask. But as we grow, it would be something to consider. So I think it's one factor, but not the sole factor on whether our project is impact or at large. So
yeah,
Can I just address?
I
would think
would
that
like
the
to say, sorry. Okay, go ahead. Don't worry. Go ahead.
sorry, I would think that the growth stage should be primarily defined by the growth plan. In that, if a project has a specific growth plan that they want to get through, then there should be growth, and maybe they'll succeed, maybe they'll not, and go from there, rather than other attributes really defining what a library, project is. So the other attributes can define whether a project can be growth, but being in growth should require a plan and then following up on that plan.
Mateo had something to say. Can I just address a quick thing that Dylan has mentioned that I would like to clarify? Like, I just to be clear, the foundation is not, as far as I know, treating AMP differently than other growth project. And I just want to, like, it's not giving it more resources. I just want to make that clear.
Yeah, I just meant more that I think AMP's actually been asking and working on a plan, and I don't know that most of the other growth projects actually have a plan in place. But maybe that's
AMP
perception.
doesn't either.
Okay, all right, cool. Fair enough.
I mean, this is
Yeah,
probably
it wasn't
been
meant to
mentioned.
call out AMP. I just sort of assumed AMP had their act together more than, say, Intern does, you know, that kind of thing.
I mean,
Anyway.
like, it's sort of, because like we're driving this conversation, but you know, that's all there is to it.
Okay, cool.
Yes,
Mateo.
Mateo has his hand up.
Mateo.
Yeah, so I wanted to say that we had significant help from the foundation on Fastify. So
Okay.
I
Cool.
cannot, I don't know, I haven't been following what AMP has been doing. So, but I have to say it has been significantly helpful to us on the Fastify community. So I'm not necessarily saying that there is a difference in attention, but there is definitely, we had help where we didn't have. So, and which is great, and it helps keeping momentum, and you know, we are attracting more collaborators, and it's growing. So to some extent, my take is very positive.
But let me ask, like, if any project asked for the sort of help that you were getting, Mateo, I wonder, like, you know, the foundation would likely assist all of the projects regardless of their.
Yeah, I was just gonna pop in to say, I think right now, because of the way things are structured, we are very well positioned to support any project that comes to us and says, hey, you know, we need help with X, Y, or Z, like we're on it. And so that reactive response to a request is something we can do really, really well. What I'm hopeful that some work on this particular space will do is allow us to also be proactive for some of those projects, and just, you know, be able to, with some kind of regularity, go to them and say, hey, we saw X on your plan. Do you need any help with that this month? You know, what can we be doing? So I think we've got it on the inbound side from foundation staff support standpoint. It's the outbound side that I think this plan will help with in terms of getting more resources.
We're also programmatizing things to make it easier to execute, whether it's AMAs or case studies or doing surveys like the node performance, you know. So, you know, we do have those capabilities, and we're thinking about ways to execute quickly to support more projects.
Yeah, and I think I think Jory's point is kind of getting to what I think is the key difference is, like, everybody can get support ad hoc, you know. So if a project puts up their hand and says, can I get help? It sounds like today we're not in a, well, we don't have resources. So, you know, that happens, but it's the, you know, is this a mechanism through which some projects can ask for extra focus? And then, you know, you for that year or whatever, 2 years, you have an extra focus where it's maybe not just the project who's asking for things, but the foundation staff who are saying, okay, every month we should plan something for this project because they've got a goal, and, you know, we can understand what those goals are and help support it.
One of the problems I'm seeing, and I think Emily was bringing that up, is like there's this notion of like these 3 stages, which, you know, we could, if they were called like bronze, silver, and gold, right? Which would be silly for a whole bunch of reasons, but just bear with me, right? We would be thinking of growth as a process and not a stage, and the conversation would be completely different. The fact that we have the silver level, which is also growth, is making all of these conversations a bit more complicated. Like, what Dylan was saying, I think about what project was this, Dylan, about already?
I was talking about intern.
Intern, yes.
Yeah.
But as an example, right? Like, to some degree, what you're asking is, intern feels like it's a silver project, but doesn't want to become a gold project. And so the fact that like silver is cold growth makes this whole thing weird. And so I think that what we need to answer are two different things. One question we have is, do we want bronze, silver, and gold? Or are we happy with sort of like bronze and gold as levels, right? And what do we do as like a growth plan, which is something separate?
I think that's a very key point. You know, I think the CNCF Robin's mentioned just has basically incubation and graduated. And, you know, that's, I think, what you're saying, Toby. Basically, like, you can join and then there's impact, and that would be like the two. And growth, you know, you could say growth, yeah, isn't a stage anymore. It's just anything you can make, say, if you want to still have it be that there's the plan and the focus. It's like any project can basically apply to have a growth plan in place for a given year. The CPC might say, yep, that makes sense. We think, you know, if every project said at the same time, there might be a decision. But otherwise, it's like, yep, you're now a growth plan, but you're still at large. You just happen to have a growth plan, right?
One thing I'd probably jump in here and say is, like, if we want to, we had a lot of conversation about the names early on, and they're basically just synonyms for the ones that are in the CNCF. If I have also thought similar things, especially how the optics have gone around growth specifically. If we do want to have a conversation about that, I think probably doing it like design by committee style is not going to be the most effective right now. And like having an issue and having kind of a place for that we can focus on that and then bring that to the CPC would probably be the most effective path for that.
Well, I think that's what we've tried to do, and came to the conclusion that there were so many people that were interested by this conversation that we should have it in the CPC. And I think Matteo had his hand up again. Is that so, Matteo?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, sorry. And Jory also, I think Jory was like, yeah, let's not talk about like bronze and silver and gold, and absolutely, like, I agree with this. But this, like, I'm not suggesting that we should have this language at all. I'm just suggesting that we have these levels, and these levels sort of imply this. And the fact that we're mixing these levels was the concept of moving from one level to the other or growing the project is what's making this whole conversation difficult. I am not suggesting at all that we should change that language.
So
just to be clear.
Timothy has their hand up, but I just want to say something really quickly. I'm host, so I can't raise my hand, but I wonder about the idea of us just having projects, and there would be a flag perhaps for like impact projects that are perhaps larger in the community and have maybe a little bit more influence over the work that we're doing. But then and that would be like a flag, and then also you could flag for like growth, like, and that might be a temporary thing. We want to, I think we've talked about this in some of our out of band meetings. If you want a specific achievement, you know, some sort of goal that you want to achieve, and you want to mark yourself as in a growth phase and get resources and such. Anyway, that's just something I was thinking about. Timothy, go ahead.
Yeah, my suggestion sort of might go with that a little bit, but I agree with what Toby's saying, that growth is kind of confusing. But I don't mind the stages. I think growth as a stage is a little weird. So what if growth was removed completely as a stage, and we had checklists for moving on to the next stage? So from at large to impact, or I'm blanking on what's before at large, but
there's
from that
nothing
one to
before
at large.
It's emeritus, at large, and impact, and then growth for the projects that have some goal that required extra support or resources. So what Joe was suggesting, where there's no growth stage, there's just, like we have projects and some of them are tagged as retired projects and some of them are tagged as impact projects and some of them are tagged as, we're all good over here, y'all projects.
Yeah.
Like that's closer to what my original vision for this, for like the stage names were, just to be like fundamentally clear. I just think it's really awful to, use language around this that may indicate that there is some hierarchy or class, system to the projects, when in fact it has more to do with whether a project needs extra marketing resources or fewer resources, for a given time, given, what they have going on.
Yeah, I think some of the things we've built into growth are helpful, but maybe not as a stage.
I'm wondering, does anybody think we still want growth as a stage?
Well, it seems Dylan was suggesting that. I mean, that
Emily-
not growth as a stage was important, but that it seemed like some folks felt like they were between at large and impact.
Right. I'm just wondering, like, but that implies, so if it's not growth, what would that imply? And does it make sense to have that
Maybe we still have a
intermediate
fourth stage, but
designation?
called something else.
Please no. We have 2 minutes left, and Emily has their hand up. So does Mateo. So let's get those real quickly.
Roughly the same as what Michael said. I would be happy for us to drop growth. It doesn't really, impact makes a difference in how they get selection on the CPC. For growth, all that you get are extra nominal resources from the foundation staff for marketing and other purposes. I don't think that is a limited quantity of thing for us to have a whole stage to limit that.
Mateo?
So yeah, so the key thing is that at large, the way we originally bootstrapped the CPC and the new foundation, we had the concept of at large more or less being projects that wants to be left alone. They want to do their own thing. They are here to get minimal. They don't want to participate with the activity of the foundation. They need a place to be for all the possible reasons, but they don't necessarily have so much activity going on or other things. So I don't know. That was my read of the topic. So it's or at least a lot of people, a lot of projects will think about it, to be honest. Just leave me alone. I don't want to be like, I'm part of this, but for whatever historical reason, I am part of it.
Joy, do you want to comment before we wrap up?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't think we have time, but I'm not sure I quite had the same understanding of at large as that. Like, there is the element of don't necessarily want to go and work to become impact, but I don't think it's a completely, you want to be left alone. That's one choice, but there could be projects that are at large, very engaged, but there's no expectation that they're going to become impact ever. They're just happy being at large, and that's where they want to be.
Concretely, before we wrap up, do we have consensus that we want to drop on growth, or is this something that we should debate next week again?
I think it's too big for us to say that we have consensus right now.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay, consensus among the people that are here today. Like, is it worth actually writing a pull request
Yes, it's
on the
worth writing a pull
progression
request.
where we remove that stuff and see what it looks like?
Yeah, and we can discuss it there. I mean, I think
I'll do
at the very
that.
least that's a good place to start.
I'll talk to you all next week, folks.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Cheers, bye.
Thanks.